going to start the presentation in a few minutes. Thank you for everyone to be here with us today. I know it's the traffic and it's like working day. After working hour, you're present here with us, and okay, just be patient with us. Thank you. So I want to. -4, we are so grateful for the support of Switzerland Embassy of Armenia, and with our partnership we had with the Embassy of Switzerland, Armenian SDC, who have made this project possible for us, and to start this journey as a very first step. And this is my honor to invite Mrs. Ursula Laubla, Deputy Head of Mission of the Embassy of Switzerland in Armenia, to make her words. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening to all of you. Very happy to see you united here and looking forward together with me to this inspiring evening today. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to this evening, to this inspiring event, From Data to Change, hosted by -4 and supported by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. Switzerland has been a long-standing partner of Armenia. Through our cooperation, we aim to promote good governance, inclusive growth for all, and climate-resilient development. Across all our programs, Across all our programs, we focus on empowering women and men to participate, to innovate, and to shape the future of their communities. Last year, we launched a call for our small project credit line to test new ideas, to foster co-creation especially, and strengthen inclusion. We looked for initiatives that challenge the status quo, use evidence and participation to drive change, and also offer innovative approaches that can be scaled up, taken up by others, and inspire others. From Data to Change was selected because it does exactly that. It tackles a critical challenge that many Armenian small towns and villages face: the lack of open and reliable spatial data for informed decision-making. So by transforming local knowledge into structured and accessible information, the project will support communities to plan their development more effectively and more transparently. What makes this initiative especially meaningful is its participatory spirit. It brings together youth, students, and citizens from 6 regions: Ashotsk, Atsun, Stepanavan, Artsvaberd, Areni, and Kacharan, to collect and analyze over 17,000 spatial records. These are not just data points, but reflections how people live, move, and imagine the future of their hometowns. In doing so, the project builds a bridge between science and education and also research. It connects the creativity of young people with knowledge of universities and the priorities of local authorities. And by involving international experts, such as Professor Sarah Williams and Professor Dana Kaff, it links Armenia's local innovation with global experience in civic data and urban design. This is the kind of cooperation Switzerland is proud to support in Armenia, where knowledge, participation, and partnership come together to make a real impact. So let me thank -4, Siuneh Arakelian, and her dedicated team for leading this inspiring work, our partners TUMO Center, NUACA, and GeoVibe for their valuable collaboration, and last but not least, AGBU, AGBU, for generously hosting us this evening in their nice facilities. Finally, I would like to thank all the students, fellows, and community members whose energy and creativity have made this project a success. I look forward to engaging and thought-provoking discussion and presentation, and seeing how this change will continue to inspire data-driven, human-centered urban solutions for Armenia's future. Thank you so much.
Cahit, yes. First of all, I want to say my grateful thanks to Ursula Obla for all the kind words. This means a lot that Switzerland Embassy of Armenia trusted us for this journey. And I would like to take you to our, sorry, this is wrong slide. I have to go first. We had many technical problems today. This problem also started everything with, we face also different challenges. I think this presentation is also a part of it. We are facing all constant challenges, but we are not like giving up. So I want to talk about our presentation, about our project From Data to Change, implementing data-driven urban solution. What is it about? Why we are doing it? And I'm going to start that from who we are. At what we say when we are -4. -4 is an architectural and design urban studio we do research works in our area. And we try to, in our research, to engage with communities and do civic engagement. And our project framework of From Data to Change is, if I explain it through the steps, it's supported to the Switzerland Embassy of Armenia in partnership with TUMO, TUMO Learning Labs, and National University of Architecture, and with collaboration with our international experts, Sarah Williams and Dana Kov, who will also give their speaks after this presentation, and also GIS, audit and hosting, who hosts our Esri platform. Why we started this From Data to Change project? Because in Armenia, we constantly face the lack of open data. And since we have been doing some research in every year, like whenever we are students, we do, sometimes we face the challenges. There is no data that is open and accessible to study. And we have taken this step to, like, from observation to build that data and to take action. And in that step, one of the most crucial roles is to empower the youth, our next generation, our next experts who will come after us, and to teach the community, if they want to make maps and make it transparent and open to public, how they can do it. So when we are, like, in Yerevan, sitting in our offices, and we don't have access to rural areas, or out of touch, how they become visible and transparent to us. So this is the images that we see that we have taken with our community, our TUMO students. I will explain later how it worked. But this images shows how bottom to top gives different perspectives. Like, maybe we can see functions of buildings, materials, state of conservation, the number of stories, and usage status. But how do we define them when we start to go through them? Or how they are the state of preservation of them? And a part of the buildings, we also map the open spaces. we understand that built environment is the combination of two main main categories, buildings and open spaces. So the methodology that we work with is actually in the from data to change we worked. It's at first step we trained 12 fellow students. What do you mean by fellow students? Hyphen4 announced an open call in this program that to all university students that they can apply and participate in a summer school, and they can learn from scratch how to create data and collect data from the environment and map through GIS system and integrated to QGIS. We used the open source QGIS source, but we didn't have any kind of structure. It was everything from scratch. We created the features, we created the attributes, all the how to collect them. And after that, our fellows led workshops where they relearned what they learned through our trainings. And at workshops at rural regional areas, 78 TUMO students participated in this project. And after the data was collected, they come back to Yerevan. We start to refine it and revise it and to go to scrap it, what we need, what we don't need, and what is extra, or sometimes we saw what we are missing. And the final step are all of this, the final stage is where we share the maps, because the data that is mapped by community, it belongs to community. So this is the whole general view. So our 12 fellow students learned spatial observation, data collection techniques, GIS fundamentals, and fieldwork planning. And one of the most interesting things in this component is students learn how to map, and immediately after they finalize that 10 days of training, they are headed to fields, and they start to do in practical phase starts. And there is no chance to forget what they just learned a week ago. And in addition to that, because they have to teach to TUMO students, they become strict and they start to revise everything, and they have to learn it. There is no other way. So when our 12 fellow students successfully finalized their trainings, they went to all 6 regions at Ashotsk, Areni, Stepanavan, Artsvaberd, Odzun, and Kajaran. For each region, we had 2 fellow students who work with TUMO students. So these small dots are representative of our TUMO students, and 2 bigger circles are the representative of our fellow students. And we see 6 TUMO boxes. Simultaneously, 78 TUMO students participated to map. And as a result, we had 3,838 overall data. A data that is collected through community, with, through bottom to top, with participatory research. And also our students learned how to do coordination teams. Like for many of our fellow students, they never knew they can do research through citizen science, like to include the community in their research phases and start to do mapping. And maybe maybe you are questioning why we are working with TUMO students, because TUMO students are in rural areas. They are the ones who know their environment very well. And they give us another perspective and point of view, how we are viewing their environment, not just as an outsider, also as a local. So after the maps were collected, the map lab started, where we started to data cleaning and structuring, and this happened in Yerevan. After 2 weeks of whole mapping, we had the quality assurance, how we are doing, how we are refining. And this shows the human chain of learning. As a -4, as a private sector, as an LLC, we are teaching the students, university students. They learn and they go to different regions. They teach TUMO students, the teenager ones. And when we say the TUMO teenagers, they are representative of the communities, like they are themselves communities who are participating in the mapping. And the data outcomes, so we are gonna see now what we have. So this is the RNEs, one of the maps. So when it's done during 2 weeks, and it's just a part of small section of the map. And one of the best parts of the map is, since it's done through GIS, and we have the capacity to upload it on Esri's online platform, we can make it interactive, and we can have all the informations with the attached images, all layers, and also we do it in 2 languages, Armenian and English. So this is Artvabert, and this is Ozun, and this is Kajaran. And I want to remind you again that we didn't have any data. It was just from scratch, creating the features one by one. And students went through through a legwork. They double checked with every feature they were creating. Is it reliable or not? And this is the attribute. We made it from scratch again. Each column with each question and each answer. It is quite very interesting. When you don't have any foundation, in this phase, we always, with our fellow students, we were talking that, what is the question you're making? And what answer you're getting from it? This is that table that you're creating. The right question and the right answer. That's how it's going to show our maps, these colors, what are they talking about. And sometimes, in regional areas, it's not easy. Not everything is structured and it's like simple to map. Sometimes you're mapping a pedestrian and you're walking and you see it's just another walk side, but it's not pedestrian because in the end it's a barrier, so it's not pedestrian. How are you gonna define it as in your mapping when you have this problem? So sometimes we make up new words and start to look if other international expertise, how do they use it? And this is it. And we start to, and also sometimes we have data that is unclassified, it's empty, it's left. We don't try to make up any stories there. We try to be honest. So as a next stage, if we start to continue this, and if other researcher had downloaded this project or this data, they can add up other informations to it. So the impact is, -4 is trying new ways to help communities to learn about their environment and to become a part of it when they are learning what they have and how they want to map it. Because there is always a way, I'm trying to explain here is, we are experts as outsiders. We arrive to different regions and we try to understand what is happening on their own lands. But how we can practice to reach a level when communities also has the power and the knowledge to become a part of it and to show us and guide us what to map. Why not even map themselves? So this is the moment when the power switch happens. If before that the power was between the governments, and when anyone is in the control, the community becomes the part of the controlling of it. So by the end, they can make new decisions. When they are making decisions for development projects, they are aware of it, what their community needs, what are the gaps, what are the needs. And each data set that we have, the 6 regions that I mentioned in one of my earliest slides, we are going to contribute it to municipalities as open source data. Also, this open source data will stay online. So any researcher or expert who wants to access the data is open, because what is mapped by community belongs to my community. That was one of the tricks that we use, and we make the TUMO students participate in this project. And one of the most amazing parts we have is the international collaboration. Like experts like Sarah Williams from MIT and Danaka from UCLA, who are with us in Armenia. I don't know what happened. I got excited. So we had long sessions that these last 2 weeks, this last week that you were here, we traveled to Ozun, and we talked a lot. And we are so grateful that you're here, because we learned a lot today. Even today, with the sessions we had with our two amazing experts, we learned that, I'm sorry, I'm just excited. Not emotional. We learned that what types of also data we are missing, and we have to add on it. And this is one of the best part of this project, because when I and my colleague Melik-Adamyan, we were going through the data, which they were all defined and scratched, we felt that something is missing. And today, through our sessions, we come up with solutions. But now we are in that phase when we are working. And what is next is to better that data and to prepare it for the next stage. So our proposals and our solutions are grounded, are not up in the air. And takeaway message from this all project is, when data belongs to people, cities begin to change from within, not only from our own perspective or our preferences. And now I want to share with you a video that will represent our project. Sorry. All right, it's okay. Sorry. Thank you, Sean. Over. Can we have an assistance for presenting the video? Marta.
Armenia, to learn about the work that you're doing, but also learn about Armenia. Just wonderful to learn about your culture and do that through maps. So thank you so much for inviting me. So my name is Sarah Williams, and my work focuses on how we can turn the narrative of data upside down and think about how we can use data meant for business to help elevate issues of those on the margins of society. I'm an associate professor of technology and urban planning at MIT, where I run something called the Civic Data Design Lab. And our lab focuses on communicating the insights of data to broad publics to affect policy change. And one of the ways that we do that is through data visualizations. I'm also head of something called the Leventhal Center for Advanced Urbanism. And the Leventhal Center is an interdisciplinary research center between architects, urban planning, landscape architecture, media science, computer science. And the idea of the center is to create change in city. It takes all of the fields to really innovate and to work towards that change. And so it makes sense that I am very interdisciplinary. I'm trained as a geographer, an architect, actually a landscape architect, an urban planner, and a data scientist. And I combine my skills in computation and design to translate data into tools for civic action, something that I call data action, which is also the name of my recent book. But let's talk about how we can create data to action. So I'm going to talk about a project, the Atlas of Popular Transport. And this is an example of a project that I just presented at the Venice Biennale, which is happens every 2 years in art and architecture. And let's see. Yeah, there we go. Oh, it's going too many ahead. Let's see. I need to be more gentle. Let's go back. I might have gone back too far. There we go. I have too many large videos in my presentation. So the Atlas of Popular Transport shows what happens when 16 cities across Africa, Asia, and Latin America took advantage of a unique convergence of forces: the falling costs of smartphones, the rise of open source tools like OpenStreetMaps, and most importantly, the determination of local actions who believed that their cities deserved to be mapped. More importantly, that their popular transport needed to be mapped. In most cities in the world, we don't have a formal transit system. We have these informal systems. And this group of actors set out to make a difference by creating and mapping the data of those systems to create an essential resource for their cities. So what do I mean by informal transit? So let's take this project, which started everything. This is a street scene in Nairobi, Kenya. And what you see on the streets are these matatus. Matatus actually need 3 pence for a ride, and they are the main form of transit in this city. They're developed by local actors, and one of the things that you can see is they're the majority of vehicles on the roadway. But can you believe it? When I came to Nairobi, there was no data or even a map about where these transport systems went. And I was asked to make a model to understand congestion of Nairobi, and I thought, this is amazing that there's no data about this essential resource, but more importantly, I also needed data for my model. So we teamed up with the University of Nairobi Computer Science Department to develop an application that collected data on the routes and stops. And we were at MIT, we could of course come in, we could have mapped it, but what we've thought was really important is by building the technology in the place where we were making the data, it was important that they build that technology. So this is one of the students that we were working with. They actually built the app that you see on his phone, and it collected the data in a format called GTFS. Has anybody heard of GTFS in this audience? I love it. It's always one person. There's always one. You guys probably have all used GTFS before. Have you ever in Google Maps tried to route yourself and figure out what the public transport was? And it told you, I can take this train or I can take this bus. You have all done that. The way that you do that is because the data behind it is stored in this format. And so I stop and mention this because it's a very simple, it's a relational database that tells us about the times and the stops. But I mention this because when we build data in a standardized format, it instantly makes it more available to everyone. So we collected the data in GTFS, and this is what it looks like. It's really just a text file. It has latitude and longitude information with a schedule and stops. And you can see as we moved through Nairobi, we are starting to create data about the transportation system, but it's a little bit hard to understand. So we started to think about a way that we could visualize this data to make it clearer for people who might not be able to use a Google Maps or a digital map. So we started to think about, could we create something look like a subway system, something we might see in Paris or London. And then as we developed that, we teamed up with the local community to help us edit the map. So actually, here what you're gonna see is us working with the matatu drivers. You can see them helping us edit the map, but they're actually instantly using it as a planning tool. They're talking about, why don't we have any matatus in the north? What's the reason for that? What's the economics up there? The northern part of Nairobi is rich, why? But maybe they could use a matatu. And so by being able to see for the first time the system, they could begin to plan for it. We held focus groups not only with the bus drivers, but with riders, with the government, to really make sure that the map was something that people could understand and use every day. And ultimately, we got the newspapers to print inserts of the map. So if you didn't have a digital phone, you could actually use this map. And it now is the official map of the city. It became viral on the internet. There's actually like sweatshirts and caps that you were using the data, and it became an icon for the city. But let's get back to the data. We were able to make that data visual to actually allow people to use it, but we also wanted the local tech community to understand what GTFS data is. So we held a hackathon where we described the data, and then out of that hackathon, there are now 6 different apps that use our data as the base, and they use it to allow people to route their cell-phone transit system. There's one of these apps is one of the most popular apps used in Nairobi because people want to know how to get around on their subway. It became the first informal transit map in Google Maps. So you guys can all map your subway here in Yerevan, and now people in Nairobi could do the same because we collected that data in a standardized format. So semi-formal transit provides mobility around the world. Actually, most cities in the world have this kind of transit. And the work in Nairobi really spawned a kind of creation of many and inspired places from Amman to Managua. And it created a global network of mapping transport data. So I started to get asked by cities all over the world, can you help me? Can you map my city? And I said, no, I can help you help yourself map the city. So we created a network where we created resources about the apps that we have. We connected with policymakers. We told them how to get funding for their projects and to do the work on their own. And in fact, Santiago de Caballeros was taught by Mexico City. In Addis, they taught Khartoum. And so instead of me helping everybody, everybody helped each other. And we created a resource center that has a base in Addis and one in Mexico City. But we were asked to be in the Venice Biennale. They asked us to be in the Venice Biennale for Digital Matatu's project, and I thought, no, look at all of these incredible cities that built their own data. Let's tell their story. And so the Atlas of Popular Transport, which was featured in the Venice Biennale, really talks about these mapping efforts worldwide. It offers a cross-section of projects initiated for diverse reasons, some to fill policy gaps, others to support grassroots organizing, sustainability, and many involved gender inclusion. All were shaped by the lived experiences of local actors whose voices are captured through the interviews that we had with them. And our team really wanted each one of these cities to tell their own story. So the data in Venice is projected on screens, and paper maps are tucked in drawers that, when pulled out, activate immersive video experiences that place you on the streets of the city. The installation invites you to feel what it's like to ride these buses, to be part of these places, and to move through systems designed by the people who use them every day. Their efforts were not part of a grand transportation overhaul or billion-dollar infrastructure projects. They were grassroots, volunteer-powered, low-tech, but wildly ambitious. From the buzzing jeepneys of Manila to the music-blasting matatus of Nairobi, the overstuffed yellow dampers of Lagos, and Cairo's ever-present microbuses, we were able to describe, show, and illustrate places that many people who come to Venice are not familiar with every day. Each project represented a quiet revolution, the decision to map what already exists, and the belief that making it visible could transform how cities move. Documenting transport systems that move the majority of people in many of these fast-growing cities created new ways to understand, navigate, and improve the places that they call home. And I encourage you all to read these stories on our website, the Atlas of Popular Transport, many of them having huge effects on policy and decision-making, each generated by the people who developed them themselves. And I would just like to say that the Atlas of Popular Transport is a manifesto in collective intelligence, the convergence of human insight, technological tools, and the imagined to create data against all limitations. It shows that knowledge to transform our cities already exists in the hands of those who move through them. It reminds us that the smartest cities are not necessarily the ones with the most sensors. They are the ones built through the hands of those collective vision of its inhabitants. So one of the things I talk about in my book, Data to Action, are several principles that I think are really important. I'm not going to be able to go through all of them today. We only have 25 minutes. But I want to talk about two of them. And this first one, I think, is really important. We must do no harm. We must interrogate the reasons we want to use data and determine the potential for our work to do more harm than good. And so if we use the Atlas of Popular Transport as an example of what I mean by this, many cities came to us asking for resources, talking about mapping, to really make these invisible systems visible. But when we went to some of the cities, we found out, should we make this data transparent and open, we might cause more harm than good, because it might cause government crackdowns or removal of the systems completely. And many people depend on these systems. Maybe they're illegal, but they are highly dependent on many low-income people to get around. So we haven't mapped all of the places because should we do that, it might cause more harm than good. And I think it's really important to think about that when you're working on projects. I'm going to talk about my 6th principle. There's 7 principles, so I skipped ahead, guys, really far. You'll have to look at the book. And I think building teams is really important to creating narratives around data for action and effective in communicating the results. And what I mean by that is it's not one person that really can take data into a policy reform or policy action. It actually takes the data scientists, it takes somebody to visualize it, it takes the policy experts to understand the questions, and to really do a great job, it takes a large group of people. So I'm gonna move to another project which I think describes this idea the best. And this project, Living Heritage Atlas Beirut, started after the blast in the Beirut port. I don't know how many people remember this horrible blast. There was an old abandoned boat that had chemicals in it, and it exploded. And of course, many people were doing a lot of rebuilding efforts around the port. But one of the things was happening is that area was home to many craftspeople, local craftspeople, actually a lot of Armenian diaspora that are in Beirut that were working in that area. And the question was like, how can we make sure to rebuild with them in mind? Because as the port was rebuilding, they were really gentrifying the area. So these old craftspeople that were living there were having a hard time documenting the importance of their community. I'm gonna show you a video.
We are the MIT Future Heritage Lab and the Civic Data Design Lab, and together we have created the Living Heritage Atlas.
موضوع الحلف هو مش بس موضوع اقتصادي وموضوع ثقافي، هو موضوع هوية.
Part of what we were really trying to do here is to construct a digital archive of geolocated historic data and images.
So I'm really excited now to officially launch the Living Heritage Atlas Beirut website. We have the Discover tab that it's mostly dedicated to understanding the visual material that we have collected so far. We have also geolocated 6 high-resolution maps of Beirut. You can really zoom in at a granular level and see, for example, the old souks and the street network.
We also wanted to create a way that people interact with the website.
For example, through physical signages that would then connect this digital archive to specific locations.
When you are walking down the street, they ask you to text a WhatsApp number. You receive an archival photo with a little story about the image.
All people that are working in the crafts in Lebanon, they have a story, they have a heritage, they have work, and they put their soul in their products.
The bulk was in the Aswad Beirut, in this region. Visited craftsmen, so it was an intimate tour where people got to experience one-to-one and see the process A to Z.
By collecting the information about where they were, how they've moved, how they've been affected by different kinds of policies over time, we hope to show and highlight the needs of craftspeople and how we can improve their condition.
The goal of collecting all of this data is to make this data open access and accessible to you.
It's available online, so you can go livingheritage.mit.edu.
I think this kind of data can help us safeguard a kind of heritage that defines what is Lebanon and its communities today.
We are
So as I mentioned, this gives you a preview, so as I'm talking, you can understand a bit. But you know, one of the things as we started to work with the craftspeople is really they wanted a way to have a network with each other, but a way to safeguard those the area that they were living in. So how could we create both this data set, but also a way for them to be part of the rebuilding efforts, to be known, to be visible within that building effort. And so having them on the Living Heritage Atlas map allowed local rebuilding agencies to connect with them for different kinds of parts of the rebuilding process. And then we also wanted to think about how these often unrecognized craft workshops can really be archived through oral, archival images, and bring life back into this and make sure that craftspeople were recognized. So as you can see, we created a database of these crafts workshops, but as we started to build our work together, we didn't just look at what existed now, but we wanted to contextualize it in what existed over time. So we collected archival images to show the importance of craftsmanship in Beirut. And we actually mapped those throughout the port area. And here actually you can see this is part of the port that is where many Armenian diaspora live. And so you can click on the data, you can look at it in different types of crafts workshops, and also then if you want to look at some of the historic points, you can look at them in contextualized older maps. Ultimately, we had 20 interviews with local stakeholders, NGOs, government organizations involved in the explosion area. We talked to 60 crafts workshops. We documented 160 current crafts, and we had over 600 archival images. And these are some of the archival data resources and people who helped us create these maps. And so this was really a collaborative project. You know, of course, our lab worked on it, but this was during COVID. So much of this work was happening by people in Beirut who were working with us, mapping and creating those images. The data is available online, and part of one of the things that the craftsmen talked to us about wanting to do is be able to connect to those people who are doing the rebuilding efforts and have them be able to connect with them. So each crafts workshop had information about how to contact them, what kinds of work they do, so that they could be involved in the rebuilding efforts. And this data was available online. But one of the things that I think about whenever I create a digital tool is digital tools don't live just in this computer, right? Like we need to bring them out in the world. We need to make them alive and part of the everyday part of the city. And so we started to think about how could we make this data part of our lived experience. So we created these stickers that we put all over Beirut to show where crafts workshops used to be. And so when you see this sticker, you can actually text that phone number and it tells you what was there before. And we wanted people to know about the stickers and to see them. You can't just expect somebody to go to a sticker. And so we had walking tours where we went to these different sites. And in those tours, we also had crafts people tell us about their history, their life. And you can see here people working with this. And so here, as I said, these stickers, you could text a number and it would tell you what was there. But we also wanted to explore potential for future collaborations and impacts of this project by connecting stakeholders within the community. And so we held roundtables and workshops to talk about the data we collect, but also to get other kinds of collection. Here is some of the tours that we did. We went to crafts workshops. These are some of the craftsmen in our database. And then we held a roundtable, and these are all people that really are advocating for crafts community in Beirut, but also bringing in NGOs, UNESCO, cultural heritage sites, and we had discussions about what was needed. And then we had a mapathon. So not everybody is going to be able to contribute digitally to our map. And really having ability to map their craft workshops. Even these individuals brought their crafts with them to show us what they do. And all of this data then was then entered into our database, but also after the mapathon, we had a roundtable discussion about some of the biggest issues that crafts workshop and workmen faced. And here's the team. And so ultimately, part of what we were trying to do is also really, we didn't want this to be our project. We wanted this project to be the project of people living in Beirut. And so NANU, which is a research organization, now keeps and maintains the Living Heritage Atlas. We just help them build the technology, and it's supported by UN Habitat and UNESCO. I wish I could tell you about a lot of other projects that we have going on in the Civic Data Design Lab, but I invite you all to check out the website, some other projects, but hopefully I gave you an idea of different ways in which we as individuals or collectively can build teams and work together to create essential resources for our city and think about how that can change policy. And I really want to emphasize the importance of doing that together, collaboratively, through people that intersect different fields. So that kind of interdisciplinary research really takes things a lot farther. Thank you very much.
So if we have like 5 minutes for Q&A, if in audience we have questions. Also after the presentation we have reception where we can also network and ask our questions. Do we have?
Thank you for the amazing lecture. I was wondering if you've ever, thinking about this data that you collect in terms of legibility, given the state the world is in right now, given how everything is militarized and how systems are seen as the targets of gray zone warfare, etc. Have you thought of how legibility can contribute to vulnerability of a community, let's say?
I mean, I guess that's exactly the first principle. So you picked up on it, right? The first principle is, thinking about when you represent things in data, whether it could do more harm than good. And I think, how do you figure that out? Anybody have any ideas? How would you figure that out?
Well, I mean, in terms of if we're in the neighborhood of Russia, we would have to be somewhat illegible or somewhat opaque to their central FSB or whatever it might be. I suppose it depends on the geography in which you are and the types of threats that you are expecting. I don't know.
No, I think this is exactly right. And I think in every community that we work in, we start to ask those questions, like, should we make this legible? What would happen? What are the where can we where can we have the impact that we want to see? And it starts with the question, like, what is the purpose driving this data collection, and will it have the effects that we want? And if we make it legible, as I said, in some cases it can be harmful. So I do think that's really important, always, is why it's number one. So not open isn't always good in some situations and cases.
Thanks.
Well, I think with the Atlas of Popular Transport, I mean, people, after we did the project in Nairobi, I just got questions from people all over the world. And of course, I wanted to help. And so, of course, I can't be all over the world. And also, in order to make it sustainable, everybody has to be helping themselves. So that's why we built kind of an education network. Okay, how did we get from all of these cities in Asia and Latin America to Beirut? I think that came through an initiative that MIT had to help really think about what can the skills that we have at MIT, how can we help Beirut at this time? And so it was a call that we had at MIT to start thinking about the work we did. And actually the way that that project started is, you know, there was so many mapping projects going on after the blast. Lots of drone footage, lots of different exercises that were doing 3D buildings. And you know, we really asked in the community, where can we have the most impact? Like, where can we be helpful? And people were just saying, again and again, it's the like local stores, local businesses, they're not getting recognized in this reconstruction. So that's how we began the project. We thought, we don't want to be just another mapping project. We really want to have an impact on that rebuilding. And so that's how we came upon that project. But they come in all different ways, shapes and forms, sizes. Some are because of passion. Really, in Nairobi, I have done work in that city for over 25 years. And I could show you 10 projects that we were there. It's a passion and it's a dedication to that place that really drives a lot of that work.
Thank you, Sarah Williams, for your presentation. It was amazing. And we can also continue our Q&A and questions also after the presentation. And now we'll welcome Dana Kav, professor from UCLA.
I'm going to put my timer on so that you can get to the reception before you're too tired. My name's Dana Cuff. I'm from UCLA, Los Angeles, and I really want to thank the Swiss agency and -4 Siuneh and her colleague Mary for inviting me to come. I'm sure I will learn more while I'm here than I will impart to the audiences, but I'm very happy to share the work that we're doing at my research lab, City Lab, which operates out of an architecture department, though I am a professor of both architecture and of urban planning, and I have an appointment in computer science. I founded the center 20 years ago. That would be much longer than 20 minutes. So I'm just going to tell about our housing work, which is very interesting in light of what I see in Yerevan and the rural communities. It's completely different in Los Angeles. We have a deep housing shortage. But maybe Los Angeles, the stereotype, isn't quite what we should be bringing to the work here. So Los Angeles can look like this, which I think on the left side is kind of what people imagine. Suburban houses, a lot of land. It takes up a lot of land. It's an environmentally inefficient, in fact, damaging kind of sprawl. We also have neighborhoods that look like the image on the right, which is Koreatown, which is much more urbane. It's where most of our students live, for example, and it has ethnic origins that are complicated and office building and housing mixed. Nonetheless, there's a general problem in most global cities, but particularly in California, of a housing crisis that's more extreme than anywhere else in the United States. So you see in this map, that's a sort of a synthetic diagram of the United States, California has the deepest housing problem. 40% of households are cost burdened, meaning they're paying more for rent than they earn. More than 30% is what cost burden actually means. So they're spending more on their rent than they need to in order to pay for clothing and food and school. And it's also true that the median house price in Los Angeles is almost $1 million, almost €1 million. So how could you ever have affordable housing when that's the price of a house? The percentage of unhoused people, people who are living unsheltered on the street, is 24%, even though, and that's more concentrated in California than other places, partly because of the weather, not because we have great services. And we have the highest rate of poverty in the entire United States. So City Lab, which we started 20 years ago, was intended from the very beginning to try to address injustices and inequities that architects have some role in addressing. And you'll see in this case that City Lab is unique as a lab because it really tries to lift up architecture as a social justice project. Not just the right of people with privilege, which is what we think of architecture serving, but to try to educate the next generation of architects and to change the policies so that architecture and the dignity that architecture and the joy that architecture can bring is something that everyone can experience. It's a pretty large goal, and we approach that in very small ways, focused in Los Angeles. So I think the last question that came up, like, how do you decide where to go? How do you decide where to study, what research to do? For us, we initiate all our own projects, and we start them in the California region, and we undertake them in a way that we hope they are applicable and generalizable to many other places. So this is just what our housing circumstance looked like. There are many people, as I mentioned, who are living unsheltered. There were 75,000 people living unsheltered in Los Angeles last year. Remarkably, each year we build 20,000 units of housing, not enough, but that's a lot for deeply affordable, and 23,000 new people become homeless. This is only going to get worse in our next political era because all of the services that have been provided are being reduced. Again, this is just showing you the kind of data that we rely on. You can see people squinting at it. What's this about? I'm mostly using it to illustrate that all the work we do is reliant on broadly collected data that then we translate and understand and interpret through the kind of storytelling and evidence-based work that can start to make solutions possible. And I think that's one of the ways data to change really operates, is that if you have data, sometimes it's so overwhelming that you think, there's nothing that can be done here. This is really an income inequality. What's an architect got to do with it? But what our work is always trying to show is that you can't solve the entire problem in any research center, but you can begin to address the seeds of the problem or kernels of the problem that then have ripple effects so that the possibility for change is evident to people. So this just shows how little housing we're producing over the years. So we have a greater and greater need for housing. We have more and more people becoming unhoused, and yet we're producing less and less housing. It seems intractable, what you would call a wicked problem. Then in Los Angeles, 75% of all the land that's residential is zoned for one house only. How you can see that more than the non-residential, more than the multifamily, is land that is only allowed to have one house on each piece of property. It's the most inefficient land use in the entire global zoning model. So what City Lab bases its work on is something that we might call projective research for data-based storytelling. That means the use of conventional and innovative research methods to create database storytelling about desired future outcomes. And we take that to the case, the end results of our work ranges from built solutions that are to inspire other buildings to a policy that works at the state level. So for the 40 million people that live in the state of California. This is different, I would just point out, than the kind of data-driven design research that exists in situations like this, where someone is really, this is Arne Jacobsen's swan chair. He measured body shapes, checked to see that the chair perfectly matched that, ends up with an aesthetic solution that's both comfortable and beautiful, and it isn't part of a complex system. It's really a set of data about bodies and the ergonomics, and then a chair that responds to that. Sometimes in architecture, I know many of you are architecture students because we saw you out of COAF, we think that architecture can do the same. There was an era when the Dutch especially said, if we just understand the plan and the program, we can wrap that with architecture, and it's a direct one-to-one map. If I collect the right data, I can wrap it with a skin, and I end up with a building like the Seattle Public Library that's a direct reflection of the data. I think that was always a bit of a creative storytelling project, frankly, because most architecture is more complicated than that, and it's not exactly one-to-one. But let me just give you one example from Los Angeles, which is like Yerevan, we have terrible traffic and bad parking setups, right? People park everywhere. Turns out that almost all of the public infrastructure is potentially parking, and then you don't have space for people, right? So we started a series of projects where we said we should be accommodating people, not cars. So basic. But we started that by saying, let's figure out how much surface parking there is in Los Angeles and how many housing units we could make there. Because if we could just tell that story, we might be able to convince people that all that surface parking, which is very convenient, is actually really detrimental to something that we all think is necessary, which is housing for everyone. So we mapped all the parking lots. There's 27 square miles of parking lot on the surface. We then started mapping it in maps, and we started then saying, if we put housing in the module of a parking space, how many housing units could we create, and what would it look like? So that began this big storyline and a series of diagrams that we launched a series of studies about making housing rather than parking spaces. I'll show you the next, another version of that same question. This comes out of the study of all that single family, single building use land. So one piece of property could only have one house. That land use, you see in the yellow diagram, that thing that looks a little bit like a lamb chop is the shape of Los Angeles. And the yellow is zoned for one single family house on one piece of property. It's everywhere. It's no wonder we have environmental crises and a housing crisis when you look at that map. And then if you look at aerial data in different neighborhoods, you can see all that space is just hidden in people's backyards. And in fact, you could see that people were already using that space illegally. It wasn't legal to build, but they knew they needed to help house their family members or make units for rent. And so on that far map, where there's more than one house on a lot, people have done that on the weekend on their own, informal construction. So we took that as the model and said, let's figure out how to legalize this. How many lots would we be able to identify as having a backyard? Turns out there were 450,000 of them. No one had produced more than 80,000 units of housing in a year recently. We had 450,000 opportunities to build housing. Free land, essentially, right? It was already in your backyard, So then we started understanding how would that be possible? turned out there were different kinds of lots all over the city. We collected data on that. No one had ever studied lot types. Some lot types could have multiple units, some could have just one. Some had already been built on over the course of years. We asked people what they thought about building, making building in the backyards legal. We started studying what it would take to actually build it. This images on the right are done with Kevin Daly, who's my partner, and will be speaking tomorrow night about some of this work. And we did a demonstration, full-scale house, is that me? A full-scale house to say these backyard homes could be environmentally sophisticated and easy to build, and you could just pop them up in your backyard with a variety of new technology systems. And in the end, we took that information and all that data, and I was able to write a law that superseded all the neighborhood laws, all the municipality laws, to allow the entire state of California, people in the single-family zone where one house and one piece of property went together, that they could build two, regardless, no extra parking, no extra review by the planning department, which immediately made 8 million units of housing possible that weren't possible before. Now, all of that was kind of hidden in plain sight. People were already doing it. It was something that people could do individually. They were doing it on the weekends. Now it would be legal. And actually it's the biggest production of housing in the state at present. I sometimes say if I die tomorrow, you could just put that on my gravestone and I would be fine. That would be enough. We turned out, I'm just going to talk about 2 more projects very quickly. Let me check my time. Yeah, I have 6 more minutes. We realized that this wasn't going to be enough because that's private land, and really we ought to be looking at public land. What public land existed where we could build more housing and where we really needed to build it? Again, this is this idea that we should be following models that exist in the city already, or following problems that we could track that everyone recognizes. And so you build a kind of coalition of willing participants that are needed to build any of this. So we did an aerial survey of the Southern California and realized that every neighborhood had schools, public schools, K through 12. Turned out they had 150,000 acres of underutilized land that was owned by public schools in the state. And the teachers are paid very poorly. I think that's true globally for the most part. In other words, teachers who everyone wanted to support their teachers, even if they didn't want any affordable housing built in their neighborhoods. That's a classic American position. Build it somewhere else. They still wanted their teachers to be housed. And so we could make a case that that extra school land should be built as housing for a teaching workforce. Not just the teachers, but the bus drivers and the janitors and the secretaries. So we collected data from all across the state through GIS mapping of the school land and what kind of development was around the school. We started looking for 4 cases of education workforce housing had been built totally on all of the different 1,000 of land that existed in the state. And we studied why it was only those 4 and what the problems were with that, and whether or not there was a way we could remove the blocks for all the other schools that wanted to build housing for their teachers. After all of that research and data gathering, so I think like Sarah was talking about, a lot of the data that we collect is actually not, some of it's GIS-based or numerical and quantitative. Much of it is qualitative. In other words, we try to understand what people's experience is, and then based on the data of experience, try to change the circumstances so that we can be more successful towards our final goal, which is building affordable housing. we studied the 4 developments. Many people said, and I can't tell you how startling this was to me, most people said to me, teachers don't want to live at their schools. They don't want to live near the kids. They don't want to live with their teachers. They want privacy. And as an architect, I thought, well, it's not like there's just one way to build that housing. There'd be a million ways to build it, actually. You could make it very private, you could make it very public, and actually teachers would live anywhere they could live that made it easy for them and affordable for them so that they could have enough money to pay for their families. It was really not about some exterior idea of, do I want to live with the kids that I'm teaching? So we learned that from the existing developments, and we also learned that each one of them had a waiting list of 70 or 80 staff members who were trying to get in. So that was another argument we could make with the state and with the schools throughout California, that this was actually a very desirable form of housing. And this kind of shows the research process then that ended again in a very successful state law that, without changing any zoning, with all kinds of requirements about parking, that says that you can build to a certain level of density without ever having to go before resistant neighborhood problems, right? Which is one of the biggest blocks to new affordable housing in the state, are neighbors who have who already live there, who don't want new people living there. And it's very difficult to find voice for the people who haven't been able to move to a community. How do you give voice and equity to people who've already been excluded? So this work was showing one means to do that. We then at City Lab realized that we were going to have to train school districts to do this. They didn't really have capacity. They were focused on education. So we then have now trained something like 18 different school districts to do this work, and we put a public program online. And we're just now seeing projects like this one, which I think is also better housing than was coming in those first 4 cases, of a kind of design that's suited particularly to education staff, that gives them the kind of dignity that they deserve as they serve our children in the next generation. Okay, the last problem is one that's going on right now, and it's another version of this public land, opening public land for housing that's otherwise been closed. This one's called Small Lots, Big Impacts. It's taking that classic Los Angeles suburban pattern and also noticing that there's 24,000 vacant lots in that kind of land that's privately owned, and there were 4,000 vacant lots in residential neighborhoods that were owned by the city. They were under 1/4 acre, and that new legislation, some of which we had helped to write and some of which others had written, would make it so that instead of building now 2 houses, a house and its granny flat, we could build, in some cases, as many as 18 houses. So we could, if we could open up this kind of land use, really change the dynamic of the single-family zone and add substantially. Okay, this is really going to be quick. All this new legislation, I think one of the things that City Lab has also realized is that we are actually educating our planning department, the people who allow certain projects to go through, because all these new laws are very difficult for everyone to understand. So just like we were educating schools, we are also educating planners, we're educating homeowners, we're educating architects in order to make the capacity realizable. And in the end, there are so many new ways in which we can build more densely and still have the kind of neighborhoods that people really value. We set up we mapped all of this in GIS. We took like 6 different databases and put that all together to find the land. This is kind of an architect's dream, I think, is they're all weird little shapes of property that take some creative thinking to resolve. So I also feel like it's really helpful when we find an architectural problem, because then I think we're going to get some special attention, and good design is more likely, not just standard development solutions that happen without much thought. This is what the land looks like. It's not particularly attractive. It's the stuff that's behind fences and that people have abandoned for 20, 30 years. And we had this international design competition, and these are the kinds of solutions that were resolved. We required that they observe existing regulations, zoning, no special treatment, and that they would end up with housing that showed the city of Los Angeles and its development industry what the next generation of housing would look like. Now, to me, if I left that at that stage, I wouldn't have done my job, meaning here's a design competition, wouldn't it be beautiful? Now we've been spending a year with the city and working with the mayor to make it so that there will be public access to these lots and to developers and architect teams. We've found financing for the first and last parts of their projects. And these 12 lots that we've singled out for development will be given over by the city to developer teams. The buildings will be built, God willing, and that will be a model for the 24,000 sites that you can see on the map on the right. So just to conclude, this is what we think of as projective research for building, that we actually are ending with very tangible material results. It takes innovative and as well as conventional methods to create the database storytelling, in this case, of the next version of suburban living. And this is something that generalizes far beyond Los Angeles. I'll just show you, this is the kind of work that CityLab does. We take on, I showed you 3 projects. We take on as many as 10 to 20 in a year. And these are the people that do the work with me. It's a really remarkable team of ever-changing students and a few permanent staff that together create this kind of culture of spatial justice in architecture, starting in LA. So thank you.
Amazing presentation. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes, of course.
Thanks again for the captivating lecture. You've said something about how do you give voice to the excluded, and then I've noticed that you sort of retroactively modeled the scenario and sort of invented an architectural solution on it. It seems like the data itself is just a little tiny part of whatever it is that you're doing. Then are you acting as an architect most of the time with this projective capacity of architecture to imagine?
Well, yes, I believe architecture has an important projective role to play, but I think that's all based on data. I mean, I wouldn't know, if you look at the housing, for instance, that's coming from this most recent project, the data from that is what has made the single-family detached house so popular. And so we then decoded that, and from storytelling, understand it's about flexibility, it's about having a front door, it's about having some landscape, it's about having some shared street. You know, I could name all of those. And those then became part of the programmatic requirements for everyone who entered the competition, and also guided the jury in selecting the winners. So there are ways in which I think this more qualitative data that comes from kind of partnership with, as Sarah was saying also, the lived experience of people who are supportive of what you're doing and not. I mean, so the imposition that my center has is that equity matters, that justice is our ethic. And if people don't agree with that, then that much I can't accommodate. Then that's not a partner for me. But if you have a justice and equity-oriented goal, then we can work together to understand possible solutions that come from our mutual knowledge. And I guess the other thing I would say about that is that as an architect, I feel like it's my responsibility to bring every skill I have to the task. And those are more architectural than they are economic development, for example. So I put together teams, but if I'm not doing good architecture, by which I mean a relatively complicated idea, I'm not justly engaging my partnerships. So yes, there's a lot of architectural solutions here. They're not the only ones, but they are absolutely central to what we do.
Right. So with the school projects, which was very interesting, looks it's like a reminiscent of monastic complexes,
yes.
almost like.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you came up with that idea after you did the housing research, like the research on lack of housing and all of those mapping projects.
Yeah.
So you came up with that idea after that? That's
well, so in the search for housing solutions, right, and the production is when you look at the broader data, like that there is no housing production and that there's no land, right? So together you think, where could I find land and where could I get production to happen? And when you then literally, we were like biologists who look at a tide pool, a pool, to see what animals are in it. Like I looked at a satellite image and we mapped it 10 different ways to see where is the land available and is any of that public. And what we found was not just public elementary schools, kindergarten through 12th, through high school, but also community colleges and other sites. So this is just one of many projects where we're looking at that kind of found land as a starting point for producing and more housing that would have greater affordability and thus equity.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Any other questions? It seems no. Okay.
Oh, wait, we have two questioners in the audience. Thank you. That's nice.
Actually, thank you very much for the presentation. I lived in California for many years, and I lived there when the ADU law actually went into place. I had no idea who was behind that, so I didn't know City Labs work at all. It's so impressive, and
thank you.
And then also the last project you showed about small lots and big impact. I have many friends who participated and got honor awards.
Nice. Oh, that's so great.
I was like, what is this that everyone's doing? I left California, so I don't know what's happening. You know, so I saw the news through my friends' projects getting recognized. So, I mean, thank you so much for the work that you do. I was just curious about how you measure the impact, like afterwards. Maybe that's an interesting thing to talk about, because the ADU law like changed the game when it came to housing. I mean, that's like huge. Even in Glendale, like I was in Glendale all the time where all the Armenians are, like all the Armenians made use of the fact that they could make extra money on their properties, right?
Yes, right.
So that like, everyone was motivated to build more housing to make it accessible.
Yeah.
So I mean, that has like 100% you can have data about that, but maybe the school one, and I don't know, maybe you can talk about the impact.
It's a super important question.
Yeah.
I try to answer it briefly so that we can get to the reception, but I'm happy to talk with anyone after that. The way we've been looking at the evidence about our success or impact is getting more systematic all the time. The most recent projects now are all carefully looking at milestones and evaluating whether we've met them. In the past, we've evaluated what work we did. So for instance, the Glendale story is exactly the story across Los Angeles and all the state of California. Everybody started building them and renting them. The data shows that they still rent for less per square foot, per area, than other kinds of housing, but it's really not affordable yet. It's still a cost burden. Because, you know, friends like yours, they like, we can't afford the house we have in front, we're gonna build a unit in back and try and make rent to help us pay for the rest of it. So that's when, because of that data, we decided we better look for public land. So we just keep working. I think one thing that everyone in my lab says is our projects never end. We only have initiatives. We don't really have projects because each one teaches us what the problems with it were and sets up our next one. Now we're getting a little better at collecting the evidence or the data to say what worked and what didn't, and I'm sure we'll be better as a lab as a result. Thank you.
Thank you.